Testing a school's water for lead doesn't cost much. Meriden tells me it only costs about $8 per sample, and it only takes about a minute to collect a sample. But even though it's cheap and easy to do, it's just not happening at most schools in Connecticut.
Come here.
Patricia Rodriguez keeps a close eye on her 3-year-old daughter, Isabella. She was the first to notice something was wrong.
It was just the way that she was acting. She wasn't holding blocks a certain way. She kept on getting sick frequently.
A trip to the doctor found dangerously high levels of lead in her blood.
11.5 was her level for lead.
That's more than double the amount of lead the Department of Public Health considers poisonous to a child. Lead is extremely harmful to children and can cause brain damage.
It can cause her to end up with learning disabilities. It can cause her to have not a good memory where she can have memory loss.
Patricia says Isabella got lead poisoning from lead paint in the house she used to rent. She was shocked to learn that she could be getting exposed to lead all over again when she goes to school.
Out of more than 1,100 schools in Connecticut, the state says they only require 170 of them to test their water for lead.
These schools that are on the list that you reference are individual public water systems.
In the past 5 years, 17 of those schools came back over the legal limit for allowable lead contaminants. All other schools in the state get their water from public water systems like MDC or Aquarian. That doesn't mean that drinking water can't be contaminated with lead. According to the EPA, lead contamination of drinking water usually comes from corroded plumbing. And it wasn't until the Reduction of Lead in Drinking Water Act that went into effect in 2014 that virtually outlawed lead in pipes and plumbing. So unless a school was built in the last 2 years, it's likely to have plumbing with lead components.
Why wouldn't the schools periodically test their water for lead if that's where the problem is and not necessarily from the water source?
If they choose to move ahead and do that, it's a proactive move. But again, it's not a requirement in the state of Connecticut.
Although Meriden schools are not required to test, this spring they decided to do so after 2,200 children across the state turned up with dangerously high blood lead levels likely caused by lead paint in 2014. 103 of them were from Meriden.
We still wanted to give everybody a level of comfort, whether it's a parent of a child or the administration in the city of Meriden.
Meriden officials say they tested every school in the city and found out that the water had acceptable levels of lead in it. But we found none of the top cities for lead poisoning in children are required by the state to test their school's water for lead contaminants. New Haven voluntarily did so for the first time this past June. The troubleshooters obtained testing results, which showed a water sample taken from a drinking fountain at Morrill Sheridan Magnet School in New Haven tested at 26 parts per billion, almost double the safe limit of 15 parts per billion. They retested at that water fountain several weeks later. Samples tested lower at 12 parts per billion.
The numbers can go up and down, and to do consistent testing is the only way you can figure that out.
Waterbury hasn't tested their school water in 6 years. But at our request, they agreed to test some schools last month. John Gill Martin Elementary School is a newer school, and the water was first tested back in 2010 when it first opened. Back then, it had virtually no lead in the water sampled. But the new test results are 11 parts per billion, still under the limit of 15 parts per billion, but it has gone up a lot in just 6 years.
4 or 5 months. She was in and out of the hospital and everything.
Patricia is focusing on helping Isabella get well again. She hopes the schools will do their part to help keep her that way.
They should do everything in their power to make sure that it's lead-free.
After our continued request, the city of Hartford agreed to test their school's water for lead this morning, and we were there. We'll bring you those results just as soon as we get them. For the NBC Connecticut Troubleshooters, I'm AJ Walker.
Dahlia Ryan barely lived to tell her story.
The doctor said he doesn't understand why I'm alive. Just those injuries should have killed me.
She was stabbed 6 times by this man, Curtis Morley, the father of her 3 children. Dahlia says in July of 2012, they were arguing at their Hartford home over a male friend, and he attacked.
By the time I realized what was really taking place, there was a knife at my throat.
The wounds run deep, both physically and mentally.
What is this wound?
That's one of the defense stab wounds I had on my arm.
And how'd you get that one?
I was blocking him from stabbing me in my chest. I'd also gotten stabbed in my bladder as well. And I'm having issues. And that's the one in my back. That's the first one I received.
These days, she goes about life trying to be normal, but the painful details of that terrible night are always with her.
I'm still suffering. I have not recovered.
And she struggles with the fear Curtis will attack her again. He was let out of prison after serving 4 years.
From what I was told by the prosecutor was that he would be deported after he served, the maximum time allowed on his sentence.
Curtis is in the U.S. on a green card. The prosecution cut him a deal that reduced his original charge of attempted murder to assault in the first degree, which is still a serious felony. But when he got out on special parole this past January, he was released right back into Hartford. Not immigration.
Where did it go wrong? What's going on here?
According to court transcripts during the sentencing, Morley's own attorney says, quote, "We do anticipate this will result in Mr. Morley's deportation."
So what happened? I reached out to the chief state's attorney's office and they declined an interview. But an official tells me they did notify Immigration, Customs and Enforcement. They also say the prosecutor, the judge, Curtis's own attorney, and even he thought he would be deported.
A spokesperson for ICE tells me it's the state's fault they couldn't deport Curtis. They declined to go on camera, but said in an email that because Curtis has a green card and that the charges were substituted down to a Class B felony, quote, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is precluded from pursuing removal charges. The final conviction does not reach the standard required for the individual to be placed in immigration proceedings. Yet according to this 2014 memo from the Department of Homeland Security, the number 2 priority for removal enforcement includes aliens convicted of a significant misdemeanor, including domestic violence or sentenced to a time of 90 days or more.
He wanted to kill me. No doubt about it. He wanted to kill me.
Victims of domestic violence are being threatened and harmed by individuals who are either here on a green card or not here legally, and yet it seems to be a passive approach by ICE in terms of just a lack of initiative to address this.
Karen Jarmock with the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence says she's contacted ICE herself to try to have violent domestic assaulters deported, but she says her concerns fall on seemingly deaf ears.
The system, i.e. ICE, is not acting on that opportunity. They're almost trying to think of every reason why the offender should be able to stay, as opposed to why this is risky and harmful to a victim who is here as a U.S. citizen.
With ICE blaming the state and the state of Connecticut saying it's up to ICE to act, Dahlia and people like her are caught in the middle.
What are some of the fears you have?
That one day I'm going to find him outside my doors.
And just days after my interview with Dahlia, she said Curtis showed up at her home. She wasn't there, but her kids were. We further pressed the state's attorney's office about this case, and now Curtis Morley is back in custody for violating a no-contact order. And now the state says they are asking ICE to review this case. We'll stay on top of this story. For the NBC Connecticut Troubleshooters, I'm AJ Walker.
Federal investigators say Jamila Williams-Stevenson, along with Loretta Colburn, stole more than 20 identities.
They took like multiple banks account on my name.
Stole my checks.
Tried to, take over my life.
Stole our mail and started counterfeiting the checks.
But it's how they're said to have gotten some of their victims' personal information that is most shocking.
They had my social security number.
Authorities say several of the alleged victims had been patients at Yale New Haven Hospital, where Williams-Stevenson was working as a companion or sitter. It's believed she used her job at the hospital to steal patients like Donna Walker's information and identity.
It was people that was expected to die. I really believe that.
Donna says she was being treated at Yale New Haven Hospital because she had suffered from a brain injury and didn't expect to survive. She thinks Williams-Stevenson didn't expect her to make it either.
They expected me to die. Like I said, I was on a ventilator.
Donna says once Williams-Stevenson and Coburn got her information, they quickly made use of it.
I got a notice from the post office that said that my address had been changed.
According to this court affidavit, once the two changed their alleged victims' addresses, they took control of their mail, then took control of their finances.
and I find out that they've been applying for credit cards.
Willie Ampley tells me his daughter was also a patient at Yale New Haven Hospital. And like Donna, she was in bad shape.
She was in the mental department of the hospital.
Willie says someone claiming to be from Yale New Haven Hospital called needing information.
They had called me and wanted me to be her beneficiary for some reason if something happened to her, so that's how they got it.
He had handed over all of his personal information and more of his daughter's.
I had made an insurance policy out on my daughter while she was in the hospital.
Federal investigators learned William Stevenson had made herself the beneficiary on a $50,000 life insurance policy on Willie's daughter. According to the U.S. State's Attorney's Office, the suspects carried out an identity theft and mail fraud scheme for 2 years until being arrested in July. William Stevenson faces charges of bank fraud and aggravated identity theft, while Coburn was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. Neither has entered a plea. We stopped by William Stevenson's home.
So we're running a story on some of the things you were accused of doing with identity theft, and I wanted to know, did you want to have an opportunity to speak up for yourself at all? Do you want to at least talk about why, or at least apologize to some of the people?
We also stopped by Coburn's, but nobody came to the door. Through court paperwork, the troubleshooters know at least 4 of the victims were patients at Yale New Haven Hospital. One of them, an 84-year-old woman who passed away. Federal investigators won't tell us if any of the other identity theft victims were patients too. We asked Yale New Haven Hospital. A spokesperson said they don't know, but are investigating. The hospital also gave us a statement, saying in part, quote, "The actions alleged to have been taken by Miss Williams Stevenson are reprehensible, and they are, quote, taking steps to ensure that this sort of activity does not occur again."
You know, if you're on death's door, that's where you want to be, at Yale New Haven Hospital.
Donna says she thinks Yale New Haven Hospital delivers stellar medical care, but she wants them to do more to protect patients' information from employees.
Yale New Haven Hospital officials say they are cooperating fully with the U.S. Attorney's Office and that Jamila Williams Stevenson is no longer employed there. For the NBC Connecticut Troubleshooters, I'm AJ Walker.
I'm very concerned because I'm trying to give money back to the government.
Linda just wants to pay what she owes, $23,000 to the Social Security Administration, a steep amount that should have gone quickly into the hands of Uncle Sam.
So I sent that check in October of 2015.
But the first check Linda mailed never reached her account with the Social Security Administration.
And then 2 months later, I decided to call up the Social Security company and see where my check was. And they told me they had no record of it. They could not find it.
So Linda gave the government agency another $23,000 check. This time, she delivered it to the Willimantic office in person.
The receipt that I got for the check I brought down to the Willimantic office in December of 2015.
They lost that check too. The reason Linda owes the Social Security Administration is because she had started drawing Social Security when she was old enough to be eligible, but later decided to keep working. If you do that, you have 1 year from the date you file to change your mind, and you have to pay back everything Social Security paid you.
But for Linda, giving money back to the Social Security Administration has been harder than getting it from them. She says she went to this Willimantic office in person, hoping this would be the time they would process her payment. But she says several months later, that third check hadn't been cashed either.
And I still have not heard anything about where my check is. I reached out to you, hoping that you can help me.
We reached out to officials with the agency, and they told us they'd make sure Linda's fourth payment was actually processed.
Within 2 days, that check was cleared through the bank.
The SSA says it should normally take 3 to 4 weeks to process a person's payment. And they wouldn't talk to us about why it took 14 months to accept Linda's money. But spokesperson Steve Richardson did agree to speak by phone about the payment system in general.
How many checks do you estimate get lost in your payment centers each year?
I don't have any information that would indicate or give any accurate number.
Richardson says they don't keep records of how many payments they lose, but they think the numbers are low.
All indications, rather, at our end say that there's a very small percentage of checks that may be not negotiated timely, And again, we're going to want to know about this in our local field offices, and we can take action.
If you owe money and you're trying to pay back the Social Security Administration and your payment gets lost, you should contact your local Social Security office and ask for a manager. For the NBC Connecticut Troubleshooters, I'm AJ Walker.